Today we have Dr. Giridhar, who will be speaking to us about Advaita Vedanta and how the understanding of Vedanta can help us navigate through the different situations of life in a very balanced and calm way. I call Dr. Giridhar a very interesting speaker because he comes from a very different background. He spent most of his life in hardcore technology as a semiconductor engineer, and over the past 10 years, he devoted his personal time to understand and go deeper into the knowledge of Vedanta, the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and lots of philosophical texts from the East. Today, he will be sharing his insights and his understanding on this topic. So, with this introduction, I ask Dr. Giridhar to take this over.
Thank you very much, Arjun. Sadashiva-samarambham Shankaracharya-madhyamam Asmadacharya-paryantam Vande Guru-paramparam. Om. In the tradition of Vedanta teaching, we always start with a prayer where we bow in reverence to the long lineage of teachers who have taught and propagated this knowledge, without whom we won't have the opportunity to learn about this most sublime of all types of knowledge. I thank Arjun for providing a platform for us to have this conversation today. I'm very thankful for all of you for joining us on a Friday evening. And I hope that in the next 45 minutes to an hour and a half, you have some idea of what Vedanta is about, what is its purpose, and what are its benefits, what are the benefits of the study. So we titled the talk, Vedanta, A Journey to Fulfillment. I thought about this a lot and finally said, it's best to focus on what do we mean by fulfillment and what do we mean by journey. So I want to start with exploring in some depth, what do we mean by fulfillment? In life, when we wake up every day, we identify ourselves as a body with a mind and a sense complex. And as that finite body, mind, sense complex, we find that there is a notion of I and there's a notion of what is not I. This notion of I that I have when I wake up is very clearly finite. It is not infinite, it's very finite. It is wanting. There is always some want, some lack. And it is very clear to me, in my understanding, that it is mortal. The body is mortal. I take myself to be the body, so I am mortal. From this starting point of I am the body, mind, sense complex, I also developed notions about I and mine. What is I and what is mine? Then if you ask what is fulfillment in the context of our lives, fulfillment is an endless pursuit we all take. And the nature of the pursuit or the method of the pursuits may be varied. But the end goal we all seek is fulfillment, whether we know it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. And how do we approach this fulfillment? Normally, we strive to aggrandize the I and to expand the mind. We have this notion that I'm finite, wanting, and mortal, and we struggle to see how we can be less finite, less wanting, and definitely not mortal. This is the pursuit of life, and this is what we do in the pursuit of fulfillment. Aggrandizing the I, we are hoping that I can be less finite, I can be bigger. And expanding the mind is another example of trying to make myself less finite, less wanting. And when we go on this pursuit in life, it takes various forms as we go through our life. We strive to get things that are possessions, material possessions. We strive for sensory gratification. We strive for getting status, titles. All of these things are aggrandizing the sense of I or expanding what I regard as mine. And what we observe when we look at our life is that every time we reach one of these milestones in the pursuit, we get fleeting fulfillment. The fulfillment doesn't last. And if you think about it, what happens is during that fleeting fulfillment, temporarily, the sense of I am a finite wanting mortal recedes into the background. But it doesn't last. It comes right back. And when the finite wanting mortal comes right back, we engage in one more pursuit to see, can I get fulfillment with something else? So life is this endless Brownian motion of pursuing various things in the hope that I'm going to find fulfillment. And if you look by and large, are we finding the fulfillment? The answer is typically no, because otherwise we wouldn't be pursuing fulfillment. The very fact we are pursuing fulfillment means we haven't found it. Then there is a very basic question. Is there a solution to this problem called finding fulfillment? Or is it a fool's errand? If it's a fool's errand, we might as well get comfortable with the idea that we will never be fulfilled. And if it is actually something that is attainable, then we want to know what is the method to find that fulfillment. Our scriptures, Vedanta, Upanishads, all of the scriptures say the pursuit of fulfillment is spot on. It is the highest pursuit in life. But our method for approaching it is all wrong. And what Vedanta is pointing to us is that we need to do something different in our pursuit of fulfillment. The goal of fulfillment is exactly right, but the method is all wrong. In some ways, if we explore Einstein's definition of insanity, Einstein famously said, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result each time is the definition of insanity. So when we do the same thing again and again, and we expect next time will be different, without actually doing anything different, Einstein said that is the definition of insanity. Now, if we ask about our pursuit of fulfillment in life, if you think about it carefully, it meets Einstein's definition of insanity. We are doing the same thing over and over at a fundamental level, and we think next time is going to be different. And we don't have a real reason to expect it, but our mind convinces us to try again, to do the same thing again. And what we find temporary fulfillment. It is fleeting and it recedes, and we are back to the problems that arise from I am a finite wanting mortal. So then, if the solution doesn't exist, we should all be feeling comfortable with I'm a finite wanting mortal, I'm a perishable. And I will always be limited, I'm always be wanting. But something deep in us tells us, I don't accept it, I fight it. If it is something that is natural, we will always accept it. But there is something that tells us deep down that this idea that I am finite wanting mortal is something I want to fight. I do not accept it. It doesn't feel natural. So we have the problem of I do not know the method to find fulfillment. What I keep doing seems to be going in circles. I'm not making a fundamental breakthrough. At the same time, we don't know how to change the approach. And this is where Vedanta comes in. Vedanta tells us that there is a solution to this problem, but we have to change the polarity of our search itself. Our search for fulfillment is always focused, before we come to the spiritual path to Vedanta, is focused on getting something, by aggregating something, by expanding my sense of I, and by expanding the sense of mine. If you think about that, you can never take the finite and make it infinite. You cannot take the mortal and make it immortal. There is no solution to the problem. There is nothing that is intrinsically finite that is going to become infinite. That is logically not plausible. Likewise, it is implausible to even consider that something that is mortal will become immortal, like the body. There is no one who has achieved immortality of the body in human history. So, how do we solve this problem? Vedanta says we do not have a real understanding of who we are. And if we gain that clear understanding of who we are freed from this bondage of endless search of fulfillment. This endless search for fulfillment is also called samsara. It goes on through lifetimes. It has no beginning. Its beginning cannot be determined, but it does have an end. That end is described in Vedanta as moksha. Moksha is finally attaining the freedom from the need to find fulfillment. So then, if there is a solution to this problem, what is the nature of the solution? As I said, if I'm intrinsically finite, wanting, and mortal, there is no way I can reverse those. But Vedanta says those aspects that I have taken myself to be are incidental to me. They are not intrinsic to me. I have taken an incidental attribute of myself and I have taken that incidental attribute as me. It's much like saying, if I wear a shirt, I do not become the shirt. If I wear a pant, I don't become the pant. If I wear a body, I'm not a body. The difference between what I perceive, what I conceive, and who I am is profoundly important. And this is what Vedanta guides us in doing in a systematic manner. A search for who am I really? Not my resume, not my set of experiences, not the titles I've acquired, not my wealth, not my relationships, not everything that I'm familiar with, because all of those are incidental. They come, they go, they last for only a time. Who am I intrinsically? Who is the invariable me? The invariable me is the one that I'm completely unfamiliar with without some guidance from the Shastras and from a guru. So then the problem of finding fulfillment in Vedanta is converted into a problem of solving ignorance of the self. If I know my real self, I wouldn't be trying to find fulfillment because my real self is all encompassing. It has no limitation, no want, and it transcends space and time. But to me, that is far from a reality. So if Vedanta says this is the problem, that we have a self-ignorance problem, the remedy for any type of ignorance is always in the form of knowledge. Ignorance cannot be solved by any type of action. We can take actions endlessly through lifetimes, but actions by themselves do not solve ignorance. Ignorance requires knowledge. So acquiring knowledge of the self is the remedy to the problem of ignorance of the self. Now, this knowledge is completely different from all other types of knowledge we have pursued in our lives, which is why it is so difficult for us to come to grips with it. Through our entire life, we have an orientation of acquiring knowledge by perception, by conception, or by experience. I can see an object in front of me. It's an object of sense perception, an orange, a banana, a song in Bhageshri Rag, something that I hear, taste, touch, smell. All of these are sense perception. So I can objectify something through sense perception. I can have a concept of something. A lot of subtle sciences are related to gaining conceptual knowledge, whether it's mathematics or physics or what have you. Then there are objects of experience. You just have to experience it. You cannot describe it. You have to experience it. Like, for example, have you tasted a jackfruit? Well, you have to experience it. If somebody has not tasted a jackfruit, you don't know how to describe it. You have to experience it. So when we come to learn about anything, this is our mental orientation, that I need to see it in some way, perceive it, or I need to be able to objectify it and conceive it, or I need to experience it. And there is only one thing in the cosmos that is not subject to objectification, and that is the subject itself. The subject cannot be objectified. And the subject is what Vedanta is entirely focused on. What is the true nature of the subject? And all the methods for gaining objective knowledge that we have do not work when it comes to gaining knowledge about the subject. So this is the problem that Vedanta is trying to solve for us. Ignorance of myself, in practical terms, translates into a confusion where I take myself to be an object of perception, experience, or conception. I take myself to be the body, my mind, my emotions, my physiology, my prana. All of these are objects of perception, conception, or experience. The question is, who is the experiencer of all these? Who is the knower of all these? And what is the nature of the knower? How can you ever find out the nature of the knower by using the knower? The problem is somewhat like if you have a flashlight that you use to illumine everything and learn about objects by using the flashlight. Now you have given the flashlight the problem. Can you illumine the electricity that is turning you into light? The flashlight can illumine everything in the objective world, but it cannot illumine the electricity that converted itself into light. The source of light cannot be illumined by light. The source of the knower cannot be illumined by the knower. So then we come to what is the journey? The journey is an interesting word. And when we think about a journey, ordinarily we would think about something that occurs in space and time. We think about a journey as going from a location X in space to a location Y in space, and there is a time interval required to go from X to Y. What Vedanta tells us is that this journey that we are trying to accomplish is actually a journey from ignorance to knowledge. It is not a journey in space, it is not a journey in time. It is not something for which we need to go find a different zip code or pin code. It is not something where we need to change our position in space or in time. It is not something that occurs post-retirement. It is not something that is dependent on any space-time coordinates. Swami Tattvavidananda used to say, somebody came and asked him, I want to pursue Vedanta. I want to give up my job. I want to go spend the next 10 years in Rishikesh. And he told him, the journey you need is vertical, it's not lateral. The lateral journey is what we're familiar with. This is a vertical journey from ignorance to knowledge, and it is independent of our space-time coordinates. So then, how does this journey look? The best example that is used to illustrate the journey in Vedanta is what is called the 10th man story. I'm sure many people have come across a version of the story. I will narrate it very quickly and really pivot to what is the relevance of that story to Vedanta and the spiritual journey. The story goes that there is a small group of students for a guru who are studying on the banks of a river. And one day, the senior student, who is a little more hefty, well-built compared to the other kids in the class, tells his guru that I want to take the 10 students, all of us want to cross the river, play on the other side. We will be back before sundown. And the guru tries to tell him, it's not worth taking the risk. Why don't you just play on this side of the river? And this boy says, no, what we can do on that side is much better. There are so many other options for playing, and we really must go. Please help us to go. And after a lot of back and forth, finally, the guru reluctantly agrees to let them go, but he tells them, remember, you're accountable for this. I'm holding you accountable for the safety of everybody crossing this river and coming back safely. And the boy says, yes, count me in. I've got it. So the boy crosses the river along with the 9 other friends, and then he counts the number of people there. And as you have it, he counts 9. He doesn't count 10. He's now distraught. He's completely besides himself. He counts again and again and again, and he counts only 9. He doesn't know what happened to the 10th person. The 10th person is nowhere to be seen. And he doesn't know what to do. He is sweating. He is depressed. He's hitting his head against the tree. And he is absolutely in grief about what has just happened. In the meantime, a wise person happens to walk by, and he notices this young boy besides himself with grief, and he asks him what happened. And the boy tells him, we were 10, now we are 9. I don't know what happened to the 10th man. And the wise person understood the problem very easily. So he said, okay, line up in a straight line. As I tap your head, please increment the count. So he goes 1, 2, 3, 4. And finally, the 10th man is the boy who forgot to count himself. The story seems extremely trivial, but it is profoundly significant in the spiritual journey. So if we try to understand what happened in this journey, the first question is, was the 10th man lost? And the answer is no. The 10th man was never lost. The question is, was the 10th man found? No, the 10th man was not found. Before the loss of the 10th man, this boy was the 10th man. During the loss, he was the 10th man. And after he found, he was the 10th man. So the 10th man was neither lost nor found. Now, what did this wise person who came and solved the problem? What did this person do? Did he create the 10th man? Did he guide him to the 10th man? He didn't create the 10th man. He didn't guide him to the 10th man. He made him realize that he is the 10th man. He made him realize that he is the one he's looking for. What did the 10th man problem tell us? When the search is all directed outwards, the 10th man is as though lost. When the search has a polarity reversal and it is directed to oneself, the 10th man is as though found. But whether the search is going on or as the search has been completed, the 10th man is ever attained. So what Vedanta is telling us is that our self, our true self, is not something that needs to be gained. It is not something to be attained. It is not achieved at a particular position in space or time. It is our innate intrinsic nature, independent of space and time. That is the meaning of what is intrinsic to us. So with this metaphor, let's examine what the journey in Advaita Vedanta looks like. The first step in this very, very important journey in our life is to actually gain the qualifications for the knowledge. The Sanskrit words for that is sadhana chatushtaya sampanna adhikaritvam, which means it is a fourfold qualifications for knowledge. I will not dive into any of these in detail, but I'll just point out some of the key features because we can spend hours on even just the qualifications for knowledge. But having maturity and discrimination is the starting point. When I examine my life and have come to the conclusion that my search for fulfillment meets Einstein's definition of insanity, there is a level of maturity. There is a level of discrimination saying, maybe I need to do something different. Doing the same thing over and over won't give me a different result. I've been there, I've done that. It's going to leave me wanting again. The second aspect is dispassion. Dispassion means an ability to see that the objects, experiences, relationships, and transactions of this world are intrinsically ephemeral. They are not going to give me the permanent peace and fulfillment that I seek. There is something larger to be sought. In our understanding, we prioritize something higher than the pursuit of wealth and sense gratification, aggrandizing the I and expanding the mind. That is dispassion. That means it is born out of wisdom, it is born out of discrimination and maturity. Only a person like that will even have the time to dive into Vedanta and trying to understand what the message is. Beyond those, the next set of qualifications are called developing the inner wealth. We all have an orientation to gain wealth. Vedanta tells us we need to gain inner wealth.
Smart people learn from their mistakes, but the real sharp ones learn from the mistakes of others.
I don't know where that came from, but it's good. So, inner wealth has to do with mastery over the mind, over the senses, the ability to focus, lock on a subject and not waver, and really develop Shraddha for the Shastras and the Guru. Because this knowledge is so subtle, without the help of the Shastras, we are not going to be able to crack this. And we have a pramanya buddhi towards the Shastras. That means we look at the Shastras as a means of knowledge and we submit to this means of knowledge with a completely open mind so that the means of knowledge can reveal my real nature to me. So once we have the inner purity and the maturity, the next part of the fourfold means of qualifications for knowledge is a strong desire for freedom. If I do not desire freedom, if I am comfortable in my bondage, there is no solution needed. The catalyst for the entire journey is this burning desire to become free. Without that, the journey is not possible. So once one develops those, the question is, what does the Jnana Yoga itself look like? What does this pursuit of knowledge look like? And how do you gain this readiness? All of the religious sadhanas, whether it is Karma Yoga, Upasanas, Pranayama, Kriya, meditation, all of them are only meant to gain the readiness for this extremely subtle knowledge. And if those things have done their job, we are positioned at the threshold of knowledge. So here I'd like to describe the metaphor of the South Indian temple, which really is a metaphor for the spiritual journey itself. If you look at a South Indian temple, there are 4 gates to the temple. If you look outside the temple, what is on the outside is in garish colors. You will see purple and gold and yellow and silver and all of that. There are figurines who are exhibiting all kinds of emotions and passion and such. That is very, very obvious when you look at outside the temple. When you walk in through any gate, the color scheme changes to much more monochromatic. Those garish colors and those portrayals of all the emotions are not there anymore. And finally, you come through any one of the 4 gates, but you have to go to see the Garbhagriha. The Garbhagriha is where the deity itself is. And the Garbhagriha doesn't have 4 entrances. It has only one entrance by design. Also, the Garbhagriha will always be dark by design. The priest lights the camphor, and in the light of the camphor, the deity is revealed, the divinity is revealed. What is this symbolically representing? There are many ways to come to the gates of knowledge, to the gates of the Garbhagriha. But eventually, we have to recognize the divinity in the fire of knowledge. The camphor that the priest is burning in the Aarti represents Ahankara, represents all that we have identified with, which is incidental to us. When that identification with the incidental is completely sublimated in the light of knowledge, our divine intrinsic nature is manifest. That is the metaphor of the South Indian temple. So, in order for the Shastras to do the job, the Guru, using the Shastras as the pramana, gives us a mirror to see ourselves. And in that mirror, we see not this body, but we see our true intrinsic nature. And when we approach the Shastras as the means of knowledge with a mind that is pure, calm, and focused, the Shastras will do the job. Vedanta is extraordinarily powerful when we approach it with the right attitude and we approach it as a means of knowledge and we have the reverence for it. The method of study of Vedanta itself typically involves 3 phases. In the first phase, we are pursuing what is called Shravanam. Shravanam means listening and gaining information. Information does not equal knowledge. It is very easy to come across a Google search that says Tattvamasi or Aham Brahmasmi. That counts as information. And that information doesn't make any sense to me if I have not been informed through the Shastras about how to understand those statements. So in Shravanam, we are gaining information. We are listening with an open mind. And the Shastras are challenging our paradigms, inverting our paradigms completely about who we really are. But Shravanam by itself does not convert the information into knowledge. There is a second step which is absolutely required to convert the information into knowledge. Only when every doubt that I have is addressed decisively will information be converted to knowledge. When the doubts persist in my mind, the statement I will make is, I know Aham Brahmasmi, but. The but is a statement of doubt, a statement of lack of clarity about what Aham Brahmasmi really means. Until the last but drops, Mananam is not complete. It means we really don't know. We don't have knowledge. We have some information. We have a lot of words, but we really don't understand what the Shastras are saying. When the last but drops from our vocabulary, the process of Mananam is complete. The last step is a very, very important step. It is called Nididhyasanam. In Nididhyasanam, what is happening is that the doubtless clear knowledge is converted to the point where the emotional mind and the intellect are in complete harmony. If I have clear knowledge in my intellect, but my mind impels me to do things that are inconsistent with that knowledge is really not internalized yet. It may be clear, it may be doubtless, but it is not internalized to the point where it is second nature, to the point where it flows effortlessly on demand in every occasion in our life. So the process of Nididhyasanam is what converts one who has knowledge to one who is established immovably in the knowledge. Through all situations in life, one being established in knowledge is what makes a Brahmanistha, a person who is established in this knowledge. As a result of this knowledge, what do we find? We find that myself is what I have been searching for all along through lifetimes. It is the 10th man that I never bothered to look for. I looked everywhere else except look at who I really am. The real me is free from all limitations. I am not bound in space or time. I am one with the eternal, transcendental divinity. All that is here is the divine. All that is here is one whole conscious being that is divine. So what do I do then? I dissolve my finitude in the divine, in the light of knowledge. If that happens, then all the problems born of the notion of me that was developed in ignorance have been abandoned. What happens then is I gain the ultimate because there is nothing greater to gain. I understand that I am not in the cosmos is in myself. I am not finite, I am not wanting, and I am not mortal. So we started on the spiritual journey with trying to make this finite, wanting, mortal, less finite, less wanting, less mortal. And what Vedanta and the Shastras reveal to us is our nature is the exact opposite of what we took ourselves to be. In gaining a clear understanding of that and being established in that, the consequence is contentment, equanimity, and freedom. Makes life a play. It is to be played with inner freedom. There is no reason to run away from life, but life can be played with freedom. And finally, in this journey, the journey is complete only when the search for fulfillment stops. The search for fulfillment is the clearest statement of ignorance. The clearest statement of knowledge is that the search for fulfillment itself completely stops. So this is the entire vision of Vedanta. This is how we approach the problem of fulfillment and the journey from ignorance to knowledge to realize that I have been searching for the 10th man. I have been searching for myself all along, and I have focused my search outward instead of inward. When I use the Shastras as a pramana and I have a consistent, systematic study of the Shastras over a length of time, all the wrong ideas that I have become married with are shed because Shastras are very, very powerful in cutting through the confusion and revealing our true nature to ourselves. Here is what is phenomenal about this knowledge. You gain nothing from it. There is nothing, no new status, no new sense of I. There is no new mind that is going to get expanded. But all the limitations, all the fears, all the wants, all of those are negated. That negation is actually removal. It is not a gaining. We shed all the negativity, we shed the finitude, and after shedding all the wrong notions about ourselves, the Brahman, the Atma, is always there, just to be identified with and just to be established in. This is the summary of the vision of Vedanta and what the journey to fulfillment looks like. I want to stop here and see if people have any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Giridhar. I didn't realize that it's already 45 minutes. Time just flowed. So we can open the floor for questions. You can either ask it directly or put it in the chat box. I have a question myself. You mentioned about Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam, which is that information sublimates as knowledge, and then you become established in knowledge. Is this a natural process, or is there ways to expedite the process of information becoming knowledge and being established in knowledge?
Actually, it's a very good question, Arjun. One of the very, very important things to understand is that the preparation and the qualification for knowledge is something we have to pay attention to all the way in the spiritual journey. In the Bhagavad Gita, for example, Krishna points out in chapter 2 that even a person who has become a pragya means one who has completed mananam. who is got crystal clear knowledge, has to be extremely watchful because the sense organs and the mind can completely throw us off balance and reset us on the spiritual journey. So the three things that one has to pay attention to all the time in the spiritual journey is Shravanam. You have to keep listening to the knowledge, because if we do not listen, we are just immersed in the knowledge that is actually false. We have to immerse ourselves in the truth of the absolute. Without that, the journey itself is not possible. And to make sure we don't get thrown off rails, we have to pay attention to Shamadama. Shama is mastery over the mind, so that the mind is got the inner purity and the focus for us to complete this journey successfully. And Dhamma is the mastery over the senses. And these are things that we can fixate on and we can get carried away and make a complete lifetime pursuit of just that. But you can measure the Shamadama in practical terms by asking, do we have the time and the focus and the ability to concentrate on the Shravanam and the Mananam? If we are, the Shamadama is at an adequate level. In the final analysis, the purity of the mind is only achieved through knowledge and being established in knowledge. So as a sadhana, there is so much you can do to purify the mind. Finally, being established in the knowledge is the final purification of the mind.
Got it. Thank you so much. If there's any other question.
Can I ask a question, please, Ram Mohan?
Please.
Yeah. No, you have spoken about search for the knowledge, the journey to the knowledge. Is it to be completed within one lifetime, or does it continue from one lifetime to another? Since we all believe in rebirth and another janma, can my search, where can I continue my search for the knowledge from where I left it off in this janma? Or do I have to start from scratch all over again?
Very good question. So I think it's in the 16th chapter in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna has exactly this question of Krishna. He says, oh Krishna, I understand what you're saying, but what if I give up everything now in the pursuit of this knowledge and I don't make it? Then I would have given up all the worldly enjoyments and I've not made it. Am I, pursuing something that has no value to it at all? And Krishna tells him, never despair. Whatever you have gained in one lifetime will set you up correctly in the next lifetime as your starting point. Krishna uses the words, you will be born in a family which practices meditations and sadhanas, and you will continue and pick up in your journey where you left off. Having said that, let me point out something else which Swami Shantatmananda told us, which is, I talked about mumukshutvam, right? Mumukshutvam is this burning desire for freedom. It is not a casual desire. It is not something that is priority number 20 in life. To illustrate that, he was telling us, he was sitting in the airport at Heathrow. And in those days, in the Heathrow airport, you have these mechanical boards, and they have all the flight numbers. And as one flight departs, all the mechanical boards turn, and then flight number 20 on the list becomes number 19. Then again, everything turns, and number 19 becomes number 18. The question is, at which point will the flight number 18 take off? Flight number 18 will take off only when there are no other flights in the runway before it, correct? So when our priority for knowledge and freedom is number 20, it will wait. When our priority and knowledge for freedom and knowledge is the topmost in life and everything else subserves that, the journey is extremely fast. So it all depends on how sincere and how urgent our desire for freedom is. When it is priority number 20, it will wait because we have said it can wait. It is the flight number 20, the runway is busy. When we clear the runway and say, hey, you're number 1, we're ready for takeoff. It's a very good metaphor to think about this because often what happens in life is we postpone the pursuit of the knowledge. We postpone questions about who am I? What am I here for? What is this life? We postpone those questions needlessly, and we think we will get to it at a certain time. But there is no reason this knowledge cannot be acquired in this lifetime if we merely put the sincerity of our effort in it and commit to a systematic, consistent study of our Shastras for a length of time under a competent Acharya. If we did that, there is no reason this knowledge cannot be attained in one lifetime. And if it doesn't, Krishna assures us in the Bhagavad Gita, we will pick up next time where we left off.
Thank you very much. You have explained it very, very clearly. Very grateful for that.
Christian, you can unmute yourself and ask.
So I was saying when you talked about Nididhyasana, you said the aim is to align the emotional mind and the intellect. What is the emotional mind? I have no understanding of it.
Very good point. These are things we study in Vedanta at great length. So as an example, the emotional mind is what makes us habitual and compulsive, right? We do certain things out of habit, out of compulsion, and we do not even think. It is second nature, we automatically do it. And to give you an example of this, there is a beautiful story Swami Dayananda Saraswati narrates. The story is of actually a Hollywood movie, where he says there is a young prince of 7 or 8 years old who happens to get kidnapped by a band of nomads. And he's taken away far from his kingdom, and he's spending all his life, walking around with these nomads, and he has no idea. He's such a young boy when he's kidnapped. He became one with them. Many years later, decades later, the same band of nomads wanders in front of the palace where he was kidnapped. And the minister of the palace recognizes this young prince by a birthmark. And he says, "You are the same prince that was lost here." And it turned out that kingdom needed a king. So he's appointed king, and finally he's convinced, I was indeed a prince. I was kidnapped and I became a nomad, but really I was the king. I was a prince, and so I'm king now. So the second half of the movie is all about what happens when this prince faces situations now, this king faces situations. So Swamiji says that there is a procession. The king is going in a procession through the town, and he notices he's on top of the elephant. He's perched on top of it, and he notices at a distance that somebody is distributing alms. He immediately jumps out of the elephant and goes and says, "Give me some." Why? This is habitual behavior. He's so ingrained into thinking I'm a beggar that although he knows he's a king, the habitual behavior doesn't go away. It doesn't go away instantly. So the difference, the dichotomy between the knowledge that I am the king and the habitual behavior of I am a beggar has to get resolved. Nididhyasana is this process of converting this disconnect and making it a harmony between the mind and the intellect so that it is effortless and natural. The knowledge is what we behave consistent with all the time. Does that answer your question?
So from what I understand, impulses generally come when there's a lack of awareness. So when the awareness dies down, impulses automatically start coming. So I understand impulses in that way. Whenever the awareness goes down, the impulses come. So is it a separate part of the mind, or is it just a dialing down of the awareness?
Yeah, in the classical approach to Vedanta, we define the mind as the seat of perception and the seat of emotion. Okay, and we define the buddhi or the intellect as the seat of knowledge and decision making. So Vedanta knowledge has to get loaded in the intellect. And the way this knowledge gets loaded is actually by dispelling all wrong ideas. The ultimate simple knowledge is so simple. The ultimate knowledge is extremely simple. The confusion is extremely complex. So what Vedanta is doing is removing all the layers and layers and layers of confusion, right? Ultimately, the knowledge is revealed in 3 words, Tattvamasi, that's all it is. But there is so much confusion I have, I need to remove all that. That is done by loading clear knowledge in the intellect. When that is loaded, now the emotional mind should not behave like it is inconsistent with the knowledge that's in the intellect, right? I'll give you another humorous example. There is a person who is convinced that he is a mouse, okay? And he sees a cat and he runs for dear life. He's petrified when he sees a cat. So people tell him he has to see a psychologist. And so a psychologist starts working with him and he spends a lot of time systematically explaining to him, what does a mouse look like? What does a human look like? Human and mice have these differences and so on. And, he says, yes, I think I'm starting to understand what you're saying. Then he goes out from therapy. Again, he sees a cat, he runs back. He has some other confusion. The therapist works some more. He runs back again. Finally, he thinks, I think I got it. Now I have no more confusion. Okay. And then this time when he goes, he seems to be okay, but then he has a big doubt. He runs right back to the therapist. He says, I know I'm not a mouse, but does the cat know? Okay. So that means the knowledge is really not internalized. If the knowledge is internalized, the question of whether the cat knows I'm a mouse or not is irrelevant. If I know, I'm done, right? But when I say Aham Brahmasmi, but my boss doesn't know it, that's a cat, okay? That means that the knowledge is not there. So the process here is of getting clear knowledge to the point where it is second nature. You're firmly established in it, and there is no doubt. And we do this effortlessly as second nature. Another example that is often quoted to illustrate the difference between Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasana is a water tank. So let's say in your overhead water tank, there is no water. And you open the tap, you don't get water. So by definition, you won't get water because there is no water there. So job 1, put water there. Now you open the tap again and you get dirty water. So what's the problem? Oh, the overhead tank must have dirty water. So clean the tank, remove all the dirt, right? And fill it with clear water. Now you open the tap again. What should happen is clear water should be flowing when you open the tap. Every time you open the tap anywhere, you should get clear water. But you find that sometimes the water doesn't flow. Now, do you have to go fill clear water, or do you have to remove a block that is preventing the water from flowing? And the answer is you have to clear a block. The pipe has a block somewhere. You don't need to go put more clear water in the overhead tank. But if you don't clear the block, you won't get the clear water on demand. Nididhyasanam is this process. In Mananam, in Shravanam, the clear water is being added in the intellect, in the overhead tank. And it's crystal clear. But if it doesn't flow on demand all the time, it means that there is a block somewhere. These blocks are vasanas. These blocks are habitual behavior, where we behave like a beggar or the nomad or whatever, right? These habitual behaviors have to be negated by immersion in the knowledge over and over, which enables us to be established in the knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Any others?
This is Ahmad. If I may ask, I'm sorry for the background noise. I'm with my niece. I'm kind of an outsider to Vedanta, but a question that comes to mind while using our analytical faculties to attend today and to listen and to try to understand, not practice or experience, is desire itself for these categories of knowledge or these higher levels of knowledge, or the desire itself to be desireless, doesn't that in a way conflict with what the initial motive is?
That's an excellent question, Ahmad. Glad you asked that. So You can understand the spiritual journey as only culminating when the seeker has been negated. The seeker has to be found out and negated. Until then, the journey is not complete. The seeker has to be clearly understood and negated. But how do you conduct this journey? Because you need to use the seeker, the knower, to gain the knowledge. But then you have to know that I'm not the knower. So the method of the spiritual journey is to elevate the pursuit of the seeker to something that is subtler, nobler, until the source of the knower itself is known and the knower is dissolved. So instead of pursuing endlessly just sense gratification and acquisition and aggrandizement, which can be our normal life, we conduct lifetimes where our entire life is focused on aggrandizement with titles and status and this and that, or acquisition of wealth, or with experiences and transactions and all of that. So in the journey, what we have to do first is something called karma yoga. In karma yoga, what we are doing is making sure that as we perform our actions, we don't get entangled and completely consumed in the cycle of actions, results, which is actually the locus of samsara itself. So in karma yoga, you do actions that you need to do with the right attitude. That means you don't take actions just because you're pursuing attractions and aversions. So that means the desire has been sublimated one level. Then you say, after karma yoga has been done, you prepare for knowledge by saying, convert some of your time, convert your priority to desiring for freedom. And the desire for freedom has to be converted to desire for knowledge. And you use the intellect and pursue this very, very subtle pursuit. And at the end of that journey, the purpose is not to get a PhD in Vedanta. The purpose is not information, the purpose is transformation. And so Ramana Maharishi would say that this journey is akin to, you take when there's a funeral pyre, when a cremation is done in India, they have a funeral pyre. You take a log of wood and you stoke the fire. And when the fire is burning properly, you don't take the log back, you throw it in the fire. The log has done its job of stoking the fire, now throw the log in the fire. This identification with I am the intellect has to be sublated in the fire of knowledge. We don't carry the idea that I am the knower of Vedanta. Ultimate teaching of Vedanta is not you're a knower, or you're a renunciate, or you're a student, or you're a guru. The teaching is the intrinsic you is the absolute. It is one with the divine. So all these statuses of knower, enjoyer, doer, all of that have to be completely converted, dissolved in the light of knowledge. So it is a pursuit that goes from the pursuit of the gross to the pursuit of the subtle to the pursuit of knowledge to finally understanding the source of the knower and dissolving the knower.
Thank you so much for that answer. So relating what you said now potentially to other I would say similar approaches or similar traditions. There's this concept / question that arises is it really the seeker that attains this knowledge, or is it the absolute which in a way through the seeker attains this knowledge? So when we get to the point in the point of not distinguishing between the seeker and the absolute and dissolving the seeker into the absolute, then we go back and ask, like, at the initial stage, can we really distinguish between the seeker's initiative and the absolute's initiative? So was it the seeker that made that took this first step on this path, or was it really the absolute that took this first step?
Ahmad, again, excellent question. In Vedanta, At the first level, we have to understand what is incidental and what is intrinsic. What is incidental we call Anatma, and what is intrinsic is Atma. It is me. The real me is called Atma, and everything else is understood as Anatma. Now, when we look at Anatma, we look at the entire cosmos and the body, the mind, the sense complex. All of this is Anatma, and I am the substratum of all of this. That has to be understood. So you ask the question now, if I am intrinsically Atma, who is the one who has the ignorance? Atma has no ignorance problem. Atma is not subject to samsara. In fact, it doesn't do anything and it doesn't enjoy anything. Atma is the transcendental reality, which is a witness to all the happenings in this waking experience or dream experience and sleep. It is untouched, it is transcendental, it's not a doer, it's not an enjoyer. So this Atma has no problem of self-ignorance. Then this body does not suffer from self-ignorance. The body is an inert entity. So the question is, who has this problem of ignorance? And this ignorance is a very, very subtle problem that is explored in one of Ramana Maharishi's texts called Saddarshanam. It has to be understood very carefully. It is called the Satyam Mithya Granthi, which means it is the knot of ignorance. So if I were to explain this knot of ignorance, I will use a metaphor of a wave in an ocean, okay? The wave has all of the limitations of the form. The wave has a birth date, it has growth, it peaks, then it decays, and then finally it perishes. So the wave says, I'm finite and I'm mortal, right? The ocean, which is a substratum of the wave, is not subject to any of the limitations of the wave. The ocean is unborn, it's eternal, it doesn't have a birth and a date of death within that metaphor. So now, the wave has a confusion and the wave can make a statement, for example, that says, I am a perishable wet liquid. There is no perishable wet liquid. Either there is a wet liquid, which is the ocean, or there is a perishable form called the wave. What is this perishable wet liquid? It is a statement born of ignorance. To say I am a conscious human being is exactly the same as saying I am a perishable wet liquid. The human,
That's beautiful. Thank you.
the human is the form, right? Just like the wave. The substratum, which is the reality, is Atma, is Brahman. Now the confusion I have is I have taken attributes of the body and imputed those attributes to the transcendental self that is me. So I have made myself a form that is mortal in my understanding. This is a confusion. This confusion is the confusion born of ignorance, and this confusion is called the knot of ignorance. One way to understand this confusion is there is nothing the wave can do that can bind the ocean in any way, because the wave is ocean. If you can do another thought experiment, suppose I tell you, you can have the ocean, I will take all the waves. I have nothing to show. I just have a word called waves and I have no content to show. You have all the content with you. So the waves, the form, are merely called in Vedanta name and form. There is a name and there's a form, but there is no substantive. The substantive happened to be the water. Likewise, in the conscious human being, the human is the form, the substantive is Atma. If I remove the human from the ocean of consciousness, the human is exactly like the wave, which has no substantive in it anymore. It takes time for us to understand why these metaphors are valid and what they're pointing to. It requires a lot more study, but I hope this gives you some way of understanding what the knot of ignorance is. The knot of ignorance is a mix-up in our mind of the properties of a form with the properties of the substantive. The substantive here is the transcendental reality. The form is always ephemeral. I confuse the properties of the form and impute them onto my real nature, which is Atma, which is a transcendental reality. That knot of ignorance has to be broken, and it is not a real knot. There is no way that the wave can bind the ocean. It is a notional ignorance, but that notional ignorance is enough to create samsara. That notional ignorance has to be remedied through knowledge, and that's the purpose of Vedanta.
Yep, thank you so much. Um, uh, Maybe I would suggest just one thing is when you say the word knowledge, and I fall into that trap as well. Is there, and I think so. This is my proposition in a sense. There are mainly two different types of knowledge. So knowledge that we try to seek on a daily basis, which is either through academia or just learning how things move around us and trying to know more in order to be in a better, more prosperous place. And there is that other type of knowledge which I think you're referring to, which is relevant to truth with a capital T, or reason, or this inner motive to union. So I just would like to point that out, and let me know if I'm thinking or if I'm deducing that this is what you mean by knowledge, maybe knowledge with a capital K.
Yeah, when we use the word knowledge in Vedanta, we discriminate between what is called aparavidya and paravidya. Knowledge of the transactional universe is what the subject of science and engineering and economics, biology, all of that is. Knowledge of the absolute is what Vedanta is about. And from the Vedantic vision, the cosmos that we experience in the waking is an appearance which is in the substratum of the absolute. Gaining an understanding of the absolute and abiding in that knowledge frees us from the entanglements of the appearances. And so Vedanta is about knowledge of the absolute. It's called Brahma Vidya or Paravidya, which means it is knowledge of the absolute. And that knowledge of the absolute is also the same as knowledge of the self, because there is only one transcendental reality. There is no two. So if I know the truth of myself, I know the truth of everything. I don't need to figure out the truth of a tree, an atom, a room, space, time. If I figure out the truth of me, I know the truth of everything. And that is why the inquiry starts with who am I? Because that's the easiest one to start on. And that is where all our confusion is also centered. So good point. The knowledge that we are talking about is not like knowledge of physics or chemistry. It is knowledge of the self. It is knowledge of the invariable nature of the subject. And you can also think about Atma as the universal subject.
So thank you. Arjun, I don't know if I can point this out, and I really hope I don't in any way cross any boundary. But if someone from the Sufi tradition, if you're familiar with it, listens to you talking, maybe just remove some phrases that only are relevant to scriptural or Vedantic traditions, he would definitely think that you you are a Sufi. So I think there's a lot of points of meeting between these two traditions. If you're familiar with any of that.
Actually, at the level of spirit, there is no zip code, there is no fiefdom, there is no property. The absolute is one. The Lord is not the chief of a zip code. The Lord is the absolute itself, right? So at the level of absolute, there is no property of anyone. It is the one transcendental reality. And mystics all over the world understand it and they connect with it. And it is one level above religion. It is really understanding the nature of the spirit.
Thank you so much for this lecture, and thank you everyone for
Thanks.
joining in.